Welcome to Best Pictures, our look at the real-life inspirations behind this year's Oscar-nominated movies. I'm Joe Fryer. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to introduce you to the stories, issues, and personalities that are the factual foundation for movies like West Side Story, King Richard, and Don't Look Up. And we'll hear from some of the stars, including Leonardo DiCaprio, Ariana DeBose, and Kristen Stewart. The Academy Awards love films that are based on a true story. Of the 93 movies that have won Best Picture, more than half are inspired by real events or real people, and this year is no different. We start with the big prize, Best Picture, a packed category with 10 nominees. Many of those films take their cues from true stories, including King Richard. It stars Will Smith as the father of tennis icons Venus and Serena Williams.
You want to check on the kids? Let's check on the kids. We got future doctors and lawyers, plus a couple tennis stars in this house. Now, I understand you got to do your job, even if some crazy-ass neighbor do call talking foolishness. And I don't even mind you saying we hard on these kids. You know why? Because we are. That's our job, to keep them off these streets.
Many consider Smith the frontrunner for Best Actor after his win at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. He told Hoda Kotb what he learned about the real Richard Williams when he took on the role.
You embodied Venus and Serena's dad.
I mean, it was such a beautiful journey for me. The thing that I noticed was how much his daughters love him. You know, there was a certain amount of brutality that Richard Williams and my father suffered that, you know, created a certain hardness and endurance.
That endurance helped Richard raise two of the greatest athletes of all time against some difficult odds. You can see that devotion and determination firsthand in this 1991 profile of the Williams family.
After-school playtime for Venus and her 9-year-old sister Serena is a lot different from other kids their age. Their afternoons are spent with their father, Richard Williams, who loads them and tennis gear into the Volkswagen bus and heads for the local park.
I think when I was 5 years old, that's when I think I started liking it a lot. I really started getting serious when I was 7. I think first it was my dad, my mom, my family going out there to help me and push me. And also on their part, it helps me to go out there to do my best and to accomplish my goals.
According to Richard, he and his wife knew that tennis would eventually play a major role in the Williams family.
Not going through that shot, lady. Yeah, no, straight through it. Good. We somewhat had the kids' future planned before they were born, and each kid in the house had the opportunity to play tennis, and Venus and Serena, they sort of liked it. And the first day that I took Venus to the tennis court, I knew I had a champion.
The Netflix movie Don't Look Up, nominated for 4 awards, is a comic satire about science denial. Stars Leonardo DiCaprio as an astronomy professor who tries to warn everyone that the world is about to be destroyed by a comet.
It would damage the entire planet, not just a house. You know.
The entire planet. Okay, well, as it's damaging, will it hit this one house in particular that's right on the coast of New Jersey? It's my ex-wife's house. I need it to be hit. Can we make that happen?
You and Shelley have a great relationship. No, you stop.
Listen, in all
you need to stop.
I will, but in all fairness, I actually paid for the house.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. Are we not being clear? We're trying to tell you that the entire planet is about to be destroyed.
Okay.
Well, it's, just something we do around here. We just keep the bad news light.
In real life, Leo is a passionate environmental activist, and he talked with my colleague Savannah Guthrie about why the film's message was so important to him.
This was originally, a metaphor for the climate crisis, and then COVID hit, and then a whole new wave of the denial of science. It was amazing to witness what was going on in real time as we were making this movie. I mean, we were sitting there trying to explain science as Fauci was doing the same thing. It was a bizarre experience.
You've said, Leo, you feel like it cracks the code. You also said yesterday, I think, that you were a little bit of a Debbie Downer on this issue. I mean, it's hard not to feel a little bit hopeless.
If you do a film about climate change, it's nearly impossible to get people to get a sense of urgency and hold a mirror to our culture and media and politics and all these things. And I just felt like this was an incredible gift to be a part of a movie that encapsulated exactly what we're going through at this particular moment in time. But yeah, I am a bit of a Debbie Downer because the clock is absolutely ticking.
Kenneth Branagh's Belfast is a semi-autobiographical tale of sectarian violence in Northern Ireland. It takes place in the late 1960s and examines the complex history of the Troubles, told through the eyes of a 9-year-old boy.
We're looking to cleanse the community a wee bit. You wouldn't want to be the old man out in the street. Touch my family and I'll kill you.
Are we going to have to leave Belfast?
We'll fight this together.
This is it? This is what?
This is war.
We're living in a civil war.
What do you want?
I want my family with me. I want you.
The film culminates in the August 1969 riots when, in real life, a 9-year-old was killed. Here's the original NBC Nightly News report on that tragedy.
The fighting in Northern Ireland grew steadily fiercer today, and most of it was done in the capital, Belfast. 5 people were shot to death there, one of them a 9-year-old boy struck by a bullet which pierced the wall of the house in which he lived. Another man was killed in a second North Ireland city. More than 1,600 British troops, 600 of them flown in from England, are trying to stop the bloodshed and burning in Belfast between Protestants and Roman Catholics. And the conflict has taken on almost the dimensions of a civil war. The greatest violence of the night, a battle of gasoline bombs and paving blocks, took place in the Falls Road section of Belfast. Catholics, most of them young men and teenage boys, advanced on streets of Protestant homes, and the Protestants came out to meet them.
Instead of taking a broad approach to tell a story about this conflict, writer-director Branagh zoomed in, keeping his focus narrow. He told MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell why he made that choice.
Part of the reason to try to write something about my experience of Belfast, my lived experience as a 9-year-old, was to try and find the macro part of it. In talking about the Irish experience, it's often so overwhelming because it's so vast and so complicated. So I wanted to concentrate on one boy, one family, one street, and see whether politics, which as we kind of understood it on the ground then, which was men in suits on television talking about these kinds of things and trying to see how ordinary people dealt with it as traumatic change occurred, even in the midst of those troubles where everything you've just described so well was at play, with our playground of a street suddenly overnight, well, not overnight, within a matter of a few hours, turning into a fortress. Still, with every step of the way, every step of the social experience from that point onwards, was trying to find what the Irish love by way of coping mechanism. Laughter, music, ad hoc parties, dancing, everything that affirms and seizes life in the midst of such an extraordinary situation. There's a line in Shakespeare at the end of Love's Labour's Lost where a barone is charged with making people laugh in hospital, and he says, to move wild laughter in the throat of death, it cannot be, it is impossible. Back in those dark days of the Troubles, the Irish somehow made it possible.
Our next film is The Power of the Dog, nominated for 12 Academy Awards, more than any other film this year. It tells the story of an unlikely relationship between an angry cowboy, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and a lonely young man named Peter, played by Cody Smith-McPhee.
I wonder what little lady made these.
Actually, I did, sir. My mother was a florist, so I made them to look like the ones in our garden.
Oh, well, do pardon me. They're just as real as possible.
Now, the film is based on a novel by author Thomas Savage, but it's not entirely a work of fiction. Savage's biographer says the original novel was semi-autobiographical, and the character of Peter was largely modeled on Savage himself. The main characters are based on Savage's family, and the setting is the author's hometown.
Tonight, it all began tonight.
Tony and Maria have been wooing audiences on that balcony since West Side Story first debuted on Broadway 65 years ago.
Do you want to start World War III?
You know, I wake up to everything I know either getting sold or wrecked or being taken over by people that I don't like.
The remake, directed by Steven Spielberg, is up for 7 Academy Awards. The original 1961 film won 10 Oscars, including Best Picture. Of course, the story takes its inspiration from Romeo and Juliet, but it also focuses on the issue of juvenile delinquency, which was a hot topic in the mid-1950s. The show's creative team was inspired by headlines about gang riots and culture clashes, not on the west side of New York, but on the West Coast. So were the streets of New York really plagued by finger-snapping gangs? Well, not quite. Take a look at New York City's West Side in 1955. Well, the show was in development.
Those boys playing in the street are some of the 8,000 youths to be found here. Although the delinquency rate is higher than that of the city, the absolute number of delinquents for the first 6 months of 1955 was not excessive. From discussion with some residents in the section, it would seem that the neighborhood is not beset with antisocial gang activity. There are small groups of boys, mostly in the younger age brackets, who have what they term gangs, but their activities center on athletic teams.
So that's the story behind West Side Story. What's also true is that the remake has created a star out of the barrier-breaking actress Ariana DeBose. She recently sat down with my colleague Willie Geist to discuss her long road to overnight success.
When I was a kid, I watched the Oscars, and I was like, oh, everybody says, and I'd like to thank the Academy. And
Right.
I kid you not, I would sit on the floor in my grandmother's living room and mouth the words I'd like to thank the Academy
Did
with
you
them. I
really?
did. I really did. So to now be a nominee, it's wild. The industry's changing, listening in a different way, and people are talking about firsts right now. I've been told I'm the first Afro-Latina, the first openly queer woman of color to be nominated for an Oscar. I was like, that's cool. It's cool to be first because in my mind, that's indicative that there will be more.
That acceptance speech was perfected in North Carolina, where DeBose was raised by her single mother, a teacher, who took her prodigious daughter to ballet, tap, and jazz lessons, beginning at age 3.
I think your mom says you came out of the womb dancing. Like, this was always, we were always going to end up here in one form or another, with you as a performer of some kind.
Yeah.
After a high school trip to New York to see a chorus line on Broadway, DeBose knew just where she wanted to be.
There was just an energy that I understood and that I felt like understood me. I finally saw myself, and it wasn't about seeing necessarily skin color. It was just about seeing people who were doing the things I loved at the level that I believed I could do it at.
Coming up, we'll hear from some of the best acting nominees and their real-life counterparts. Welcome back to Best Pictures, our look at the real stories behind this year's Oscar nominees. Jessica Chastain won a Screen Actors Guild Award for playing the title character in The Eyes of Tammy Faye.
Jesus keeps a taking me higher and higher. Jim will preach and I'll sing.
The movie is about the rise and fall of televangelists Jim and Tammy Faye Baker in the 1980s. Chastain recalls the moment in history that made her want to make the movie. It was a 1985 interview that Tammy Faye conducted with a gay man who was living with HIV.
My father held my hand and told me that I was his son no matter what.
Ah, thank God. You know, thank God for a mom and dad who will stand with a young person. I think that's so important because no matter what happens to a young person in their lives, they're still your boy. They're still your girl, no matter what happens in their life. And I think it's very important that we as mom and dads love through anything. And that's the way with Jesus, you know. Jesus loves us through anything.
Jesus loves me just the way I am.
This groundbreaking TV moment really did happen. While Tammy Faye Baker died in 2007, the man in that interview, Steve Peters, is still alive today, which is remarkable when you consider that at the time, he had been told he had just months to live. This past year, Peters spoke with NBC News about the interview. He called it powerful, radical, and said it ended up getting Tammy Faye in a lot of trouble. He can watch the original 1985 clip on our website, NBCnews.com.
At Sandringham, the Queen led the royal family from the church. The Queen Mother helped down the steps by Princess Margaret and the hand of Prince Harry. The Princess of Wales checked that people weren't getting too cold.
It's all wrapped up. Yeah. Break on. Yeah.
Princess Diana greeting the public just a year before her separation from Prince Charles. This is the public face of the British royal family, but the film Spencer imagines what might have happened behind the palace walls during this 1991 Christmas holiday.
You know, at school you do tenses.
Yeah.
It's the past, the present, future.
Right.
Well, here, there is only one tense. There is no future. Past and the present are the same thing.
Kristen Stewart earned her first Oscar nomination for her portrayal of Princess Diana. She spoke to Savannah and Hoda about how she approached the role.
I took her into my physicality in a sort of emotional, spiritual way. I'm such a huge, enormous admirer of her, and it's hard to not be impacted by that energy. I just also luckily had a good 4 or 5 months to work with a beautiful coach, and I trust the process. You know, it became really physical and muscular, and then once I got there, it was really important to focus on her spontaneity and her life. And I think every picture I've seen of her, every bit of footage I've seen of her, she is exuding life and just like kind of exploding alive. And so I couldn't make everything perfect and precise. You know, I still needed it to kind of live and breathe and feel unruly. I feel like when she walked in a room, it felt like you didn't know what was going to happen.
The script indicates that Ricky takes his hands away from Lucy's eyes, turns her around and says,
"No, it's me."
So my question again, Jess. Does Ricky honestly, truly believe that there might be 8 different men who routinely walk into their apartment, all of whom sound exactly like Desi Arnaz?
You think we're saying Ricky's stupid?
I think you're saying the audience is. And that's something for which they won't soon forgive you.
That's Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball in Being the Ricardos. The film takes a behind-the-scenes look at Ball's marriage to husband Desi Arnaz during 1 week of production for their 1950s show I Love Lucy. Ball was not only a groundbreaking performer, one of TV's first female comics, but she also owned the company that produced the sitcom, one of the most successful of all time. Back in 1983, Ball told Jane Pauley that when the show began, she had no grand ambitions.
I was only going to work for about a year or two, so that I'd have something like home movies to show my baby. I was pregnant at the time.
When the idea was planted for a television show, and you, took it literally to New York, and was there...
No, we wouldn't go to New York, and that's how we came to own it.
I'm talking about taking the idea. You didn't even take the idea?
No,
march the
CBS
idea
asked us to go into television and said, come up with an idea, and we'd like you to go into television. So it took us quite a while to come up with an idea.
As a team, you and Desi as a
team? They didn't want Desi.
That's what I was thinking.
And they
wanted
also wanted us to shoot it in New York. And so I stuck to my guns. I said, I certainly don't want to quit pictures and do television and have to move to New York. That doesn't make sense. I want to stay home and have babies. And that's why we want to work together. And they said, well, it didn't seem quite right to have a Cuban husband for a young American couple. I said, why not? We are married.
Composer Jonathan Larson was just 35 years old when he died unexpectedly of an aortic dissection. Larson never lived to see the success of his best-known work, the rock musical and Broadway sensation Rent. Now his story is being told in the new film Tick, Tick, Boom. Joining us to talk about Jonathan Larson's legacy is Tony Award winner Wilson Germain Heredia, who starred in Rent as Angel and also makes a cameo in Tick, Tick, Boom.
Such a bittersweet experience to watch it and to be part of that project. But what I loved mostly about it and what I felt was so poignant is that people got to see the Jonathan that we knew.
Back in the 90s, Rent was still in rehearsals when Jonathan passed away. What do you remember?
I remember the grief, but the resilience that we all had as well to not just fall apart and go forward with the show anyway. The immediacy That's what I remember also, the immediacy of having to tell the story even more so now after he passed.
In Tick, Tick, Boom, you make a cameo in this remarkable scene that is just packed with Broadway legends. What was it like to be a part of that, and what do you think Jonathan would have thought of that scene?
I didn't realize how big of a segment it was until I was in the studio and I saw, like, oh my God, look, it's Chita Rivera. Oh my God, it's Joel Gray. Like wow. And then the honor that I felt to be part of something like that, because it was also a representation of the people that inspired Lynn as well, and the people that inspired also Jonathan Larson as well. And I think that Jonathan would have been I think that he would have crossed his arms as he usually did back then, that he would just kind of lean back and he would just, and when things went right, Jonathan would just nod his head, was like, yeah, that's it. I hope that it continues to inspire other people very much to create and to follow their passions.
Coming up, Questlove and the history behind the Summer of Soul. Welcome back to Best Picture. Since 1943, the Academy Awards have been honoring nonfiction storytelling with the Best Documentary category. The early winners were largely World War II propaganda films, but recent films have included musical tributes like 20 Feet from Stardom, Searching for Sugar Man, and Amy, which was about Amy Winehouse. This year, Questlove is nominated for Summer of Soul, his doc about the Harlem Cultural Festival of 1969. Spoke with my colleagues at Today about how he rediscovered this historical milestone.
You know, once I realized the importance of what this film represented, to me, it just wasn't about me curating a bunch of songs together from a performance. This was my chance to restore history. So in the beginning, I was a little intimidated,
Big
why would they let, a first-time driver behind the wheel?
Right.
But, I felt an obligation and a little bit of pressure to get history correct. And I think that the producers chose me because I have a fresh set of eyes. They wanted a musician's eyes to tell the context of the stories.
Our final film is a real hidden gem. It's called Writing with Fire and is also nominated for Best Documentary. It tells the story of an all-female news outlet in India as it tries to expose corruption and uphold its journalistic integrity, all while facing some incredible odds. I recently talked with the film's co-directors about the movie.
When we met the women, we felt like we were in the presence of change makers, of women who had scripted their own narrative. And in a very interesting moment in time, they were shifting from 14 years of being a print newspaper to a digital pivot, where at the time when most women in the newsroom had not even touched a smartphone, it felt the gumption, the leap of faith, the lightness of being that they had, and the absolute amazing vision that they had to see this through was very attractive. The women are working in situations that are hostile, unwelcoming, minimize them, diminish them, but I think they knew the lay of the land very well.
They were confronting police, they were exposing the mafia, they really, really were brave. What do you hope is the main takeaway for those who see this documentary?
I think the power of believing. A lot of times we want to see change, but we're not sure whether we can be invested in the mechanics of it. We've become impatient and cynical to see it through. But there are the women at Cavalleria remind us that even if the impact of what you do might not be super evident the very next moment, something is shifting.
Just to add to that, I feel that as artists, our job is to give people hope, and we live in a very fractured world. And so we were naturally drawn to the story because it spoke to the idea of another world is possible. And it wasn't sort of like wearing pink glasses. It is actually when you work on the ground and create shifts and change and tectonic sort of like reversal of conversations and break barriers, it's possible. And I think this film essentially highlights that, because women who you would not expect to hold beacons of democracy in the fourth estate are showing us the way. So if they can do it, what's stopping us?
If you haven't seen any of the films discussed here, don't worry, they're all currently available for home viewing, except for Writing with Fire, which debuts on PBS on March 28th, the day after the Academy Awards. That's our show. Thanks for joining us for this look at the real-life inspiration behind this year's Oscar-nominated movies.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.